Hey everyone, so last time, just as a review, we talked about tobacco and specifically getting into alcohol, how it's a depressant. So today what we're really going to be focusing on is alcohol and the effects on the body, specifically BACs and breathalyzers. So taking a look at this first side here, we're talking about some of the things that affect actually alcohol getting into your bloodstream. One of the main things we see being a big contributing factor is food and when you eat it. So if you take, just basically picture in your head like a long garden hose and you cut off both ends, so there's ways for things to come out both sides. And if you take all of just water and pour it through, it's obviously going to get to the other end very quickly. Now, if you were to take maybe ground up, I don't know, beef, if you will, and stick it in there and then put water on the other side, you would really have to take your hands and push the actual meat and the water through, so it would take longer for the water to get one side to the other. This is basically how it works in terms of food blocking up the intestines, which makes it take longer to actually get into the bloodstream. So we always suggest, if you are going to be consuming any alcohol in later years, of course, that this would be after a significant meal. So the next thing we're looking at here is after it actually hits the bloodstream. We need to make sure that we have a good concept of where this is getting metabolized. And we'll talk about what metabolism is a second. So this is happening 95% by the liver. If you take a look at the picture down at the bottom right here, this is what we talked about before, where this is actually not someone who's pregnant. This is someone who is most likely a severe alcoholic, where your liver starts to swell, and then there's actually swelling around that area. It basically is your body's way to try to protect itself. So that's basically just fluid that you're seeing there. That's a severe case of alcoholism, but when taken at a steady, safe level, your liver is able to get rid of about 1 drink per hour. This is going to be really important when we look at BAC later. So 95% of the alcohol ingested is by the liver. The last 5% basically comes out through your body through urine, sweat, feces, your breath, and saliva. That's why you could easily smell on someone's breath even the next day that they have alcohol coming out of their mouth. So it's not difficult for even a cop to detect that you've been drinking just by smelling your breath. So next thing we're looking at is proof and percent. Both of these words are describing the exact same thing. It's just two different ways of looking at a number. So let's start with percent. Percent is really what they're talking about is if you have a bottle of beer, how much of that is pure ethanol alcohol. So it's not all pure. If you're looking at something like maybe hard liquor, like a vodka, that's going to be much more pure than something like beer. So basically what proof and percent is just helping you figure out how strong something is. So it's usually, as you can expect, it's expressed as a percentage. Proof is just shown a little bit differently. It's very easy to compute the difference between percent and proof. All you would do is take percent and multiply that by 2 to get proof. Obviously, you can go the opposite way, and if you had a proof and someone said, what's the percent, you would divide that by 2. 80 proof is considered to be the quote-unquote, I'll say, normal amount. So if you see something that maybe had 100 proof, that's going to change, and that's going to be a much higher potency for the type of alcohol that you would be consuming. Here we're taking a look at serving sizes. If someone says, I had a glass of beer, okay, we need to understand what that means. That potentially could not be 1 drink if that glass was actually bigger. So 1 beer is considered to be 12 ounces, and typically that would be 4 to 5% alcohol. 1 glass of wine is about 5 ounces, and that's typically around 12 to 16%. And then 1 shot of 80 proof liquor is 1.5 ounces. So often you'll see someone with a glass of beer at a dinner, and you would assume that's 1 drink, and people often get misled by that and can get into trouble in terms of accidents or even just receiving citations from officers because that glass could easily be 16 ounces. So that wouldn't be considered 1 drink, and that's what we really need to work on here. So if someone has, let's call it a red Solo cup, and they fill it with wine, let's say they fill it up 3/4 of the way, that could easily be 10 ounces, which would actually get you 2 drinks technically when we look at number of drinks of wine. So we need to be really careful because often, especially in a party scene, they're not going to be serving you 5 ounces of wine. They're not going to be serving you 12 ounces of beer. They're going to be giving you more than 1.5 ounces of hard liquor. So it's really important to actually understand these serving sizes and how they apply. Here we have a look at a couple of different types of alcohol, and what I really want you to focus on is the idea of locating their percents or their proof. Sometimes it's easy, like if you look up here and we have the Bacardi 151, the 151 is talking about proof. It doesn't say proof next to it, but that's the knowledge that you need to be having beforehand. So if we talked about the most common number for proof, that was 80. So if someone says, hey, I'll have 1 drink of this Bacardi 151, and they pour themselves 1.5 ounces, because that's what I taught you, and they drank that, and they would say, hey, I had 1 drink. But in reality, this 151 right here is proving that that's almost twice the amount of a normal proof. Again, 80 times 2 is 160, so you're getting really close to 160 there. So in reality, even just 1 shot of Bacardi 151 would be considered 2 drinks. Other times, if you look on a bottle of beer right here, it tells you, but it's very, very tiny in this low corner. You can't even really read it here. And that actually says 9% alcohol by volume. So 9%, if you look back to what we said here, typically a normal beer would be somewhere between 4 and 5%. So someone would say, hey, I'm drinking 12 ounces. That's 1 drink. But then you say, no, we got 9% over here. That's actually going to be 2 beers or 2 drinks, we would call that, if you've just consumed this bottle. This is just a little joke of a picture here. That's way, way more than 5 ounces. But you can say, hey, I had 1 glass of wine. And we have to, again, we're looking at the serving size. We're not looking at just the container that it's in. People may have seen these before. Four Loko has changed dramatically because there was a lot of backlash from consumers and parents because of the Four Loko drinks. They were high in alcohol volume. I believe they used to be about the equivalent of 4 alcoholic beverages. Plus, they had a lot of caffeine in them, which caused students or whoever was drinking them to actually stay up later, possibly drink more. So their alcohol content went down dramatically there. We see Captain Morgan spiced rum, that's 100 proof, so again, that's more than 80. And then here, if you're just looking at a regular Sky vodka bottle, you can't see the proof of the percentage just looking at it from this far away. So it's really important to understand what people are putting in their bodies so they don't consume more than they actually intended to. So let's get to talking about BAC. BAC stands for blood alcohol concentration. Some people may change the C, but I usually call it blood alcohol concentration, or you could say blood alcohol content. Either way, what they're actually talking about is how much alcohol is in your bloodstream at one point. So if we take just a look at gender and how that's affecting people, males will generally have a lower BAC than females, and this is because of how alcohol gets metabolized or removed from the liver. So a lot of times this actually happens in the stomach for males, and it's a lot more efficient than it is for females. So if a man and a woman are the same weight and they're drinking the same amount, the same time, generally if they both were to take a breathalyzer, a male will have a lower BAC than a female. So females should really never try to quote unquote keep up with a guy and their drinking. Always smaller people, and this is typically by weight, but if you're shorter, typically you're going to weigh less anyway, are going to feel the effects of alcohol more than larger people. If you take, let's just picture Shaquille O'Neal, and he walks into the room, and I stand next to him, and I'm 5'4", and you say, Shaquille O'Neal's much bigger than I am, and you just look at him and say, hey, who do you think has more blood going through their body right now? And you would say, I think Shaq does, because he's bigger, so he needs more blood throughout his body. I would say, you're right. So if he has more blood, and I have less blood, but we put the same amount of alcohol into our bloodstreams, my bloodstream is going to be filled with a lot more alcohol than his just by percent. Another way of thinking about that is if you take 2 glasses of water, and you take food dye, and 2 glasses of water, and you have food dye, 1 glass is huge, and 1 glass is small, and you take a little dropper of food coloring, and take 2 drops of blue over here, and 2 drops of blue over here, and you stir it up, and you say, well, they both drank the exact same amount, they both have the same amount of blue in them, but who is the darker blue? Well, the darker blue would be the one with the smaller glass of water, because by percentage, they have more alcohol in their system. So how do we figure out, okay, what someone's BAC is? So again, BAC, blood alcohol content or concentration. And one thing I really want to make sure we understand is I've heard a million myths regarding your BAC and how you can get it to change. I've heard crazy things. Can you suck on a penny and it will go down? Nope. Can you take a cold shower? No. Can you have a drink of coffee? Absolutely not. Can you rub dirt in your mouth? No. Gosh, now you're just going to be arrested, and now you're going to be messy with dirt in your mouth, so that's not a good idea. The only way you can get your BAC to go down is time. That's it. There's no magic pill. There's nothing else you can do. The only thing that you can do is wait for your liver to do its job. Wait for your liver to metabolize that alcohol so it can get it out of your system. Again, if we look back here, this is at 1 drink per hour. So if someone has 10 drinks, it's going to take their body 10 hours to fully get rid of that alcohol from their system. Lastly, in this slide, I just want to make sure we understand the idea of tolerance. I know we've talked about that already in previous lessons. Tolerance is your body's ability to get used to a drug, and this could be anything from tobacco to Claritin, even if it's anything as innocuous as that. So someone might have been a big drinker throughout their whole lifetime. Let's just say I have Aunt Sally and Aunt Jane. And Aunt Sally, she's a drinker. She drinks every day. She drinks a lot. She may even be an alcoholic. And Aunt Jane, she's not a drinker. She really has 1 glass of wine once a month. They go out together. They both have 3 glasses of wine. Aunt Jane, the non-drinker, is acting a little loopy, can't walk as well, is really talkative, and you can tell something's weird with her. But Aunt Sally, she's fine. She's acting normal. She can walk. She can talk. You wouldn't be able to tell anything different. Now, if Aunt Jane and Aunt Sally are the same size and both women, their BAC is both going to be high. But because Aunt Sally has higher tolerance for alcohol, she won't show the effects as much as somebody else. And that's big, because a lot of times people feel as though they are safe to drive or safe to handle something because they don't feel the effects, but the effects are still happening in the body. So last thing we're going to be looking at here is understanding how we figure out someone's BAC. The picture up top is actually a new device you can buy, which is pretty awesome. And you can just blow into that little device on the left, and it will pop up on your phone with an app and tell you what your BAC is and if you're legal to drive. So it's basically what it does is it measures the alveoli that comes out of your breath, and to be able to see how much alcohol is in your bloodstream. So they actually don't take a blood test. They're actually using your breath to figure out how much alcohol is in there. In Pennsylvania, drunk driving starts at 0.08. So if you have a 0.08 and you're in a car and a cop gives you a breathalyzer test, you will be arrested for a DUI, and we're going to be getting into that a little bit later. So what we're looking at here is an example of a BAC chart. So if you don't have $100 to spend on the device that I just showed you, you could use something like this. So what we're looking at is 3 different charts. Right here, and I know it may be a little bit hard to see, is your BAC after 1 hour. Here's 3 hours, and here's 5 hours. The 2 other aspects that you need to understand is someone's body weight and the total number of drinks they've had. So, for example, if I say, all right, we're talking about a guy, and again, this is men. There's a separate chart for women. And a man has been drinking for 3 hours, I tell you. We need to look at this chart right here. And he weighs 180 pounds. You go over to this column. And he's had, let's say, 7 alcoholic beverages. So you go down to where you see 7 meet up with the 180. And right there, it looks like 0.12. So his BAC would be 0.12. Even if he's 21, that would still be over the legal limit to drive or operate any type of vehicle, so that man would get a DUI. All right, so we'll be referring back to this many times. Please feel free to come and check this out if we're a little bit confused about BAC and how we get the breathalyzer and how that is a part of our law.